What happens when a warrior's heart keeps beating but his weapon falls silent? When the machine fails but the man does not? This is not just a story of aerial combat. It is a story of survival against physics, against the enemy, and against the crushing isolation of the stratosphere. A story of ingenuity, defiance, and sheer, unbreakable will. On December 5, 1944, high over the snow-blanketed forests of Nazi Germany, a lone American fighter pilot faced a nightmare scenario. His mighty Mustang, the legendary P-51 that had cleared the skies for the bombers, had betrayed him. Its Merlin engine, a symphony of mechanical power, fell deathly quiet at 20,000 feet. To the enemy below, he was a falling leaf, an easy kill. To the Allied air controllers, a soon-to-be lost signal. But this pilot refused to quit. This is the day a Mustang fell silent, but its pilot's spirit roared. To understand the desperation of that moment, we must first understand the machine, the man, and the merciless war in the air he fought. The North American P-51D Mustang was a masterpiece of aviation, a long-range escort fighter that could finally protect the Boeing B-17 Flying Fortresses and consolidated B-24 Liberators of the U.S. 8th Air Force deep into the heart of the Third Reich. Powered by the British Rolls-Royce Merlin engine, it was fast, agile, and deadly, armed with 6 .50 caliber Browning machine guns. For the young men of the 8th Air Force's fighter groups, it was a savior. But it was also a complex machine, and in the thin, sub-narrow air at 20,000 feet, any failure could be catastrophic. Our pilot was First Lieutenant Paul Bud Jennings, a 23-year-old from Chicago, Illinois. He was a member of the 375th Fighter Squadron, 361st Fighter Group, based at RAF Little Walden in England. By December 1934, Jennings was no rookie. He had flown multiple missions into the hellish German air defense network, known as the Defense of the Reich. He had seen flak so thick it blackened the sky, dueled with agile German Focke-Wulf FW 190 seconds, and deadly Messerschmitt Bf 109 seconds. He understood the stakes: protect the bombers, destroy the Luftwaffe, and make it home. The strategic situation was critical. The Allies were grinding toward Germany following the Normandy invasion, but the Luftwaffe, though bloodied, remained a potent, deadly force. Every bomber lost was a tragedy. Every experienced fighter pilot lost was a blow to the Allied war effort. The life expectancy of a bomber crew was terrifyingly short. Fighter pilots like Jennings were their guardians. On this early December day, the 361st was assigned to escort B-17s targeting a synthetic oil refinery near Berlin, a target vital to the German war machine. The mission profile meant hours over hostile territory, constant vigilance, and the ever-present threat of mechanical failure in an environment that showed no mercy. The mission began like any other deep penetration raid. Pre-dawn briefings in cold Nissen huts, the smell of coffee and cigarette smoke hanging heavy. The tense silence as crews suited up in electrically heated gear, donned oxygen masks, and walked to their waiting aircraft under a sky still holding on to night. Jennings' Mustang, christened Lucky Star, glistened with frost. His crew chief gave him a thumbs up, a ritual of trust and hope. At 0800 hours, the thunder of 100 Merlin engines shook the English countryside as the 361st took to the gray skies, forming up with the vast bomber stream heading east. Crossing the channel, the tension mounted. The first sign of the enemy was not fighters, but flak. Over the initial point, the German anti-aircraft gunners found their range. Black, oily puffs of deadly smoke erupted around the formation, jolting the aircraft with concussive blasts. Flak so thick you could get out and walk on it, as the saying went. The bombers held formation, a testament to their crew's courage. Then, at 1,145 hours, the fighter controllers' voices crackled over the radio bandits. 11 o'clock high. The sky erupted into chaos. A mixed gaggle of FW 190 seconds and BF 109 seconds dove through the bomber stream, their cannons flashing. The P-51s of the 361st peeled off to intercept. Jennings, leading his flight of 4, pushed the throttle forward, the Merlin responding with a smooth, powerful surge. A dogfight unfolded across miles of sky, contrails painting frantic scribbles in the blue. Jennings managed to get on the tail of a Focke-Wulf 190, lining up a deflection shot. His 6 guns rattled a sound he felt in his bones. He saw strikes on the enemy's fuselage and wing root. The FW-190 spewed smoke and began a slow, spiraling descent. Confirmation later, a probable kill. But there was no time to celebrate. As he leveled out, searching for his wingman and the rest of the group, the first warning sign came. At 1,220 hours, just as the Luftwaffe attack began to dissipate and the bombers turned for home, Jennings noticed his engine temperature gauge creeping into the red. Then, a slight but perceptible drop in RPM. His heart rate, already elevated from combat, spiked. He checked fuel pressure, mixture settings. Everything appeared normal on the panel. But the engine note had changed. A subtle, ominous vibration began to thrum through the airframe. He keyed his mic. "Lucky star to any Green Dragon aircraft, I've got a rough engine. Temperatures high." His squadron mates acknowledged, forming up around him. For 10 agonizing minutes, they nursed the ailing Mustang west, away from the worst of the threat, losing altitude slowly. Jennings feathered the propeller, adjusted the coolant controls, did everything the manuals and his training dictated. For a moment, it seemed to stabilize. Then, at approximately 1,235 hours, over a frozen patchwork of German forest west of the Rhine, the Merlin gave a final shuddering gasp. A series of metallic bangs echoed from the engine cowling. Thick black oil smeared across his windshield. The propeller windmilled to a stop. Silence. Not the silence of peace, but a deafening, terrifying void where the roar of his engine had been. At 20,000 feet, the only sounds were the rush of wind over the canopy and the frantic beating of his own heart. His Mustang, a creature of immense power, was now a 10,000-pound glider, and it was starting to fall. In that instant, fear gripped First Lieutenant Paul Jennings. But it was a cold, calculating fear, one that sharpened the mind. He was alone in a dead aircraft, deep inside enemy territory. The rules of survival were brutal and clear. His first duty was to his comrades. "Mayday, mayday, mayday, this is Green Dragon 4. My engine is out. Repeat, engine is out. I am at Angels 20 gliding, position approximately 50 miles east of Eupen." His wingman's voice, strained but calm, came back. "Copy, Lucky Star. We have you visual. We'll stay with you as long as we can." But their fuel was limited. They could not follow him down. His options were vanishing as fast as his altitude. He was too far from Allied lines to glide to safety. Bailing out over Germany meant almost certain capture, a one-way ticket to a prisoner of war camp for the duration. But staying with the aircraft meant attempting a forced landing in unknown, hostile terrain, a forested, snow-covered landscape dotted with villages that housed people who saw him as a terror from the sky. He made his decision. He would ride the Mustang down. If he could find a semi-open area, he might survive the crash landing. He jettisoned the canopy, the sudden roar of the slipstream filling the cockpit, the cold air biting at his exposed face. He released his drop tanks and began a slow, shallow left turn, searching for a clearing in the endless sea of dark green fir trees dusted with white. The altimeter unwound with dreadful speed, 18, 16, 14,000. The Earth, once a distant map, began to resolve into terrifying detail. He could see roads, the steeple of a church, the geometric lines of a small town. He knew German flak units, and infantry would be tracking his descent, waiting. At 10,000 feet, his wingman's voice returned, final and grim. "Bud, we're at bingo fuel. We have to turn back. Godspeed." The two escorting P-51s waggled their wings and climbed away, leaving Jennings in utter solitude. The silence was now psychological, a crushing weight. He was descending into the belly of the beast, unarmed, defenseless. The bitter cold of the high altitude seeped through his flight suit. His mind raced through emergency procedures. He switched off all electrical systems to prevent a post-crash fire. He tightened his harness until it bruised his shoulders. At 5,000 feet, a new horror presented itself. The only remotely clear area he could see was a small, snow-covered field on the outskirts of a village. It was perhaps 600 yards long, far shorter than a Mustang's normal landing roll, and was bordered on one end by a dense pine forest and on the other by a line of power lines. It was a death trap, but it was his only chance. He lined up his approach, his dead-stick glide path a fragile, irreversible commitment. The ground rushed up. The trees at the field's edge were no longer trees, but individual branches, sharp and threatening. He could see figures running in the village, soldiers or civilians. He didn't know. He pulled the lever to lower the landing gear. Nothing. The hydraulic system was dead. The wheels remained locked up. He was coming in for a belly landing in a field too short, with obstructions on all sides, in an aircraft not designed for such an impact. In the final seconds, at less than 100 feet, he saw the power lines directly in his path. He pulled back on the control stick with all his strength, the heavy Mustang mushing, its nose rising sluggishly. The aircraft skimmed over the wires with mere feet to spare. The shadow of the trees at the far end now filled his entire windscreen. Impact. With a deafening, tearing screech of metal on frozen earth, the P-51D Lucky Star hit the ground. The airframe convulsed, slewing violently to the left as it plowed a deep furrow through the snow and mud. Jennings was thrown forward against his harness, his helmet cracking against the gun sight. The world became a blur of noise, vibration, and spinning whiteness. Miraculously, the fuel tanks did not ignite. The aircraft slid for what felt like an eternity before its left wing dug into a drainage ditch, spinning the fuselage around and bringing it to a sudden jarring halt just yards from the dark wall of the forest. The dust and snow settled. Dazed, ears ringing, Jennings took a frantic inventory. He was alive. He could move his limbs. No searing pain of broken bones. The cockpit was a crumpled mess of instruments and bent metal. But his compartment had held. He had survived the crash, but his ordeal was far from over. He unfastened his harness and stumbled from the wreck, his .45 caliber pistol in hand. He was in Germany. He had to evade capture. He took a few steps away from the smoldering aircraft, his legs wobbly, and looked toward the village. He could hear shouts and see several men in uniform Volkssturm, the German home guard, running toward him, rifles at the ready. The field was open. There was nowhere to run. In that moment, capture seemed inevitable. But then, Bud Jennings looked back at his ruined Mustang, and he saw not a wreck, but a resource. The tactical mind of a fighter pilot, trained to assess and adapt, kicked in. The aircraft was German property now, but perhaps it could still serve him one last time. Instead of fleeing into the woods where he would be easily tracked in the fresh snow, he did the unthinkable. He turned and ran back to the aircraft. He clambered up onto the mangled wing root and then onto the fuselage, just behind the cockpit. The German militiamen, now within 200 yards, slowed, confused by this action. What was this captured pilot doing? Jennings reached down, grasped the sturdy nylon handle of his partially deployed parachute, which was still packed in its harness behind the seat. With a mighty heave, he pulled it free. He then jumped down, gathered the white silk canopy in his arms, and sprinted not away from the approaching Germans but parallel to the tree line, toward a denser, more overgrown thicket at the corner of the field. The Volkssturm men opened fire. Bullets snapped past him, kicking up spurts of snow. He dove into the thicket, the parachute bundle in his arms. Working with frantic speed, he used his survival knife to cut the parachute lines and began tying the white silk to branches and saplings around him, creating a low, camouflaged hide. He then burrowed into the center of this makeshift snowblind, covering himself with the remaining silk and a layer of forest detritus and snow. He lay there, perfectly still, his breath fogging in the cold air, his pistol clenched in his hand. He could hear the Germans arrive at the crash site. He heard their excited voices, their commands. He heard them fanning out, searching the edge of the forest. Boots crunched in the snow mere feet from his hiding place. A twig snapped. He held his breath, his finger on the trigger of his .45. The search continued for over an hour. But the white parachute silk, combined with the natural shadows of the thicket and a light dusting of snow that began to fall, rendered him invisible. The Germans, convinced the American pilot had fled deeper into the forest, eventually called off the immediate search, leaving guards at the crash site. As dusk fell, bringing with it a deeper, more penetrating cold, Paul Jennings began phase 2 of his impossible escape. Using his escape compass, he oriented himself west. Under the cover of darkness, he moved from tree to tree, avoiding roads, his white silk camouflage now wrapped around him like a ghostly cloak. He was alone, injured, freezing, and hunted, but he was free, and he was moving toward Allied lines. For 3 brutal days and nights, First Lieutenant Paul Bud Jennings evaded capture. He lived off melted snow and the scant rations from his survival kit. He navigated by the stars, hid from patrols and farmhouses, and kept moving west, driven by a singular focus: to get back. On the afternoon of December 8th, exhausted and near hypothermia, he stumbled upon an American infantry outpost of the 1st Infantry Division, the Big Red One, near the German-Belgian border. The sentries, seeing a haggard figure in a strange white shroud emerge from the trees, nearly shot him. His frantic cry of "I'm an American pilot," in a Chicago accent, saved his life. He was safe. Medical examination revealed he had suffered a concussion and severe bruising from the crash, but no critical injuries. He had survived a mid-air engine failure, a dead-stick crash landing in hostile territory, and a perilous evasion, all through a combination of exceptional piloting skill, rapid tactical thinking, and sheer, dogged determination. The legacy of his flight is one of legendary airmanship. Intelligence officers who later examined the circumstances were astounded. His decision to use his own parachute as immediate camouflage was cited as a masterstroke of evasion tactics, studied and taught to other pilots. The P-51 itself was a testament to its rugged construction, having absorbed a catastrophic impact and allowed its pilot to walk away. For his actions on December 5, 1944, First Lieutenant Paul Jennings was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross. The citation praised his extraordinary achievement, superb airmanship, and conspicuous gallantry in the face of extreme peril. More importantly, he returned to combat. He flew more missions with the 361st Fighter Group, eventually surviving the war and returning home to Chicago. His story a quiet testament to the resilience of the human spirit. The Mustang named Lucky Star had fallen silent, but the man at its controls had spoken volumes through his actions, proving that even in the machine age of total war, the will of a single individual could defy the odds. The story of Bud Jennings is a stark reminder that in the vast industrial conflict of World War II, victory often hinged on the courage and quick thinking of individuals in moments of supreme crisis. It was a battle fought not just by armies and fleets, but by lone men in silent cockpits, in frozen forests, refusing to accept their fate. This was just one of countless untold stories from the Second World War. Subscribe to World War II Records as we continue to bring these forgotten chapters of history back to life.